Hello, it's Daniel Piatek. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. I wanted to talk about today about people's stories. The idea that we all have a story of our life in essence. What's happened to us, how it's affected us, how it's playing into our current moment in time. So this is something that's basically kind of always on my mind, and it's a framework in which I'm working with clients on. But I've been thinking about it recently, just for a number of things going on in my own life, and asking myself how best to use this understanding that we all have stories, and those stories are, unless we're really conscious about it, playing out in this moment in time and continuing to perpetuate into the future unless we consciously interrupt it. So I'm going to try to keep this brief, but there's a couple different things I've been thinking about that I wanted to share, because I'm also curious to hear what you have to think about these concepts, because it's something I'm really working with, like how to really kind of walk through this. And I think, I don't know, it'd be interesting to see what comes out of the communication. So there's a couple things. So the fundamental idea that I'm thinking about can be spoken about from different places, but the one that's on my mind today is that it's easy to look at somebody else and somebody else's life, whether it's somebody who's close to us in our life or somebody we encounter for a moment on the train or on the street, and we completely collapse their entire life into what's happening in that current moment, and make who they are, make the entirety of who they are based on what we experience in that moment. It's a pretty natural, habitual response in us. And then, particularly people we know, we see patterns of behavior over time, and we can also draw conclusions. And then as we know more about somebody's story and history, those patterns of behavior can make more sense. So the first point I'm trying to bring up is that anything that any of us do in a moment actually can make complete sense in a rational way, complete sense if we understand enough of the history of somebody. So in the moment, it might be, why is that person doing that? Or that's really weird, or that's self-destructive, or whatever we think, that's wonderful. But if we understand enough of the person's story, their history, what's happened to them, how they've related to it, how it's infected them, etc., then an action in any given moment can make complete sense. And so, first reason I want to bring this up is that we often tend to pathologize or make wrong behavior of somebody because we don't understand enough of the story. So somebody who maybe is severely depressed, and we can, in essence, pathologize that and think, oh, there's something wrong, or they're doing something wrong, or in essence, there's something wrong with who they are. But if we understand enough of the story, who they are right now makes complete sense. Like if you'd had to go through all of that and had to struggle in this way, had the kind of situations you had in your life, that state of depression, other example, that state of supreme anger, of fluctuating moods, whatever it is, can make perfect sense. It doesn't make it right, correct, etc., but it makes sense. And when something makes sense, we treat it a certain way. We come with more of an openness, rather than if we make it wrong, there's something wrong with them, this shouldn't be, this isn't right, then we come with a completely other lens, which most of the time is not very helpful. So that's the first point I want to make, is that if you understand enough of somebody's story, including our own story, then the behavior that we see out there, or the behavior that we see from ourselves, makes sense, which means it's the perfect response in this moment given all of the history. given all of the history, which gives you a more open, empathic, loving, I want to say accepting, because you're not fighting the fact that it is that way. You just come to meet it that is that way. But then the question becomes, well, what do I do then? What do I do then? So if we're willing to meet something with it is what it is because the story makes sense, even if I don't understand the story, I don't know enough about it, is that this person or my own behavior in this moment makes total sense based on the history. Now the question is, what am I going to do about that? So what I mean by that is that because we encounter situations in our life, again, person on the street for a moment, people that are in our lives a little more frequently, people that are in our lives quite frequently. And then we have to ask ourselves, okay, so what do I do about that? So the first is that I've discovered, and I'm really working on myself with situations all the time, which can be really challenging, because you meet a lot of interesting situations in life, of just really trying to adopt the position of, okay, this behavior, no matter how I feel about it in the moment, makes sense based on who this person has become through their life. Now, what am I going to do about what's right in front of me? So, there's a couple things. First is, I've learned a lot by doing my own personal work. I've learned a tremendous amount by doing my own personal work, of having to really struggle with making myself wrong for experiencing what I'm experiencing, or making myself wrong for behaving the way that I did in that situation. So there's the difference here I want to really make a distinction about, is that there's the difference between what I would call guilt, which is I feel bad that I did that. I feel bad that I did that with that person or that situation and for the effect that it has. It's guilt. It seems to me like it can be a very healthy response in the recognition that I did something that I'm not happy with, proud of, or caused harm, and I feel guilty about that. I feel the effect of that. Healthy. The other one, which is more common for many of us, and very not necessarily conscious levels, is something that can be labeled shame, which is I'm bad, I'm wrong. There's something wrong with me because I did that. That shows there's something fundamentally wrong with me, with who I am. So these things operate on very, more conscious levels at times, but very unconscious levels. And that will have to be video for another time. But I think you get that distinction. And so for myself is to, part of what's helped me to fight back against those shame response of thinking there's something wrong with who I am fundamentally, is to start seeing more about my own story of life, seeing more about what's happened to me, how I responded, how life responded to me. Filling in the gaps of my own story has been tremendously helpful. And because I realize it's like, I'm in life in ways at times that I'm not proud of and I don't want to continue, I'm not happy with. And based on my history, this makes sense to me. So it's not that there's something fundamentally wrong with me. It's that there's something going on with me now that needs to be addressed, that needs to be looked at if I want my behavior to change or my responses to change in the future to similar situations. It's a much more loving, accepting. To me, this is one way to look at what self-love looks like. Is I see you, I see all of you. I see you in the moment, I see you in as much history as I can know, and I accept that that's what you're dealing with in life. And another part of self-love, and what can I do, what can I do in order to not have this keep happening again, because I don't like living with the consequences that this behavior or this way of seeing myself and seeing the world, I don't like the effects of that in my life, and I want to do something about that. So then that leads me to then how I can start to be with other people, because as I do this with myself, it creates some space for me to understand that when I encounter other people and situations and behavior that I don't like, I don't appreciate, I feel disrespected, etc., I find that it really helps if I can, first of all, embrace the perspective that, first of all, is to register, I don't like that. This doesn't feel right. That's important, first of all. And then to say, okay, so this person's behavior in this moment makes some sense based on who they are, where they've come from, their story. Why is that important? Because then I can keep in my own presence a sense of respect, of dignity, of not devaluing that human being that I'm dealing with in the moment. This makes me emotional, because I feel like this is one of the difficulties right here in the discourse that's happening in the world. That's for another video. But to not in that moment devalue the human being who I'm having to encounter at that moment. It sets a different framework then in which to address the behavior. So this is a human being who, if I understood enough of their story, what they just did with me would make complete sense. Now, doesn't mean I'm going to accept the behavior, but I accept the human being as they are, not making them less, not making them some foreign other that's not me or who I could ever possibly be. Now I've got to deal with the behavior of the situation that's in front of me. And how do I do that? So see, that puts me in the place that I can actually start to deal with what's in front of me, accepting the human, but not necessarily accepting the behavior, if that makes sense. This is really, really critical. And I'm finding it's helping me to sort out situations in my life and helping me to find different kinds of responses that honor me and honor the other person. Sometimes honoring the other person means exiting that situation or exiting that relationship. I'm not talking about staying in a situation that is not beneficial or not good for yourself. I'm not suggesting that at all. But that there's what's kept in the picture is dignity and respect and honoring of a human being, and how challenging it is to be a human being on this planet, especially at this time. So we're all having a really challenging time finding our way through very challenging times. So how to hold our own presence and sense of honoring what it means to be a human being as we love and protect and honor ourselves, and not having to tear down, diminish, devalue the other person. This to me is critical. And the results of doing that may mean, and probably will mean in a number of instances, no longer being involved with that person, removing yourself from that situation. I'm saying this because I want to make it clear that I am not endorsing just allowing yourself to get walked over or disrespected by another person. So to just step back a little bit, because what's coming to my mind right now is that the first part of what I said in this last little section is that the first thing is that you recognize that there's something going on here that doesn't feel right. Because, and this is so much of what I work on with clients, is to start to notice the ways in which our body, our senses, mostly non-physical senses, but our physical senses also, but mostly our non-physical senses, register when we're being impacted. So the impact can be positive, the impact can be negative, anywhere in between, but where we're registering the fact, ow, that hurt. Because part of the issue also in this, what I'm discussing, is that we don't register the impact, which means that we end up reacting before we even consciously realize that we've been impacted by someone being disrespectful, by behavior which we don't want to have in this situation, kind of a thing. So is to register the impact of the intrusion into our space by being disrespectful, etc., whatever it is. And then secondly is just saying, okay, this is a human being, they're dealing with whatever they're dealing with, I don't need to know any of it, but that is the best response they can give right now. Because then I calm down something in myself. I calm down the part of myself that wants to come back to attack, that wants to come back and defend myself by trying to rip them down, make them bad, make them wrong. It's in that space right there where the things come up inside of us that are the ist responses, racist, sexist, blah, blah, blah. It's this response that's wanting to devalue somebody. So this takes some presence of mind, presence of heart, to say, hold on a second, that's the best this person can do now. Meaning I haven't devalued them, I haven't turned them into an object, I haven't pushed them so far over there that they're no longer anything like I am, and therefore whatever I do in this moment is justified. To not do that. And then say, okay, that behavior just happened, what am I going to do? And it might be, excuse me, it might be just you leave, it might be you have to sit down and say, look, we need to talk about this. So you deal with the behavior and the effects on you in whatever way is appropriate, but the thing is, you'll find much more appropriate responses that actually honor the impact on you, rather than honoring this primitive response to want to in essence protect by trying to tear down. It brings up a whole other set of possibilities of how to respond in that situation, but it takes presence of mind. It takes presence of mind. And what I found for me is that presence of mind comes more and more as I've done my own personal work, done exactly what I'm talking about, but with myself. And maybe this needs to be another video because this is getting on kind of long. But if you take everything I just said with another person and you make it just be all about yourself within yourself, me within myself, you would call this in essence the self-critic. The part in us that is just judging, taking us down, and then in essence attacking us. And the more I've dealt with that, oh my God, I can't even tell you. It's been, and continues to be, but it's been one of the most difficult struggles of my life, is to see how intense this inner self-critic is, and to begin to allow myself to feel the impact of it, because that was the first one. Register the impact is to first see that there's an impact. Register the impact. It's like, oh my God, oh, why do I feel so bad about myself right now? Why do I feel so awful? Why have I just lost so much energy for something that I was a minute ago excited about? These kind of things. And then, oh my gosh. And then to start paying attention and say, oh, yeah, that's the best that this thing can do. based on the history that I've had of having those kind of voices coming from outside of myself in this life and other previous lives. Now, what am I going to do? I think first of all, I need to just sit here and feel what that feels like. And I sit there and feel what that feels like. Then a response comes. A response comes that really is letting myself register the impact of that. And on a personal level, this is where great, great, great healing comes from. Is because we register the impact. We register the impact. So that kind of went a different direction than I was planning in the end. But I'm hoping it kind of makes some sense how this all fits together. Because as we do our own work, which for me, from my perspective, is where all this has to begin, it doesn't mean we have to go off and get ourselves all sorted before we can kind of start being different or dealing with the outer world. But but to realize that all of this comes from beginning to sort ourselves out from within, understanding the inner dynamics and how they're playing out as we respond in our lives. Then, as we're doing that, it creates room for others and situations that begins to be more open because we've created that openness in our own beings around these kind of internal dynamics. So I'm just offering to you to understand that we're all always playing out stories. Believe it or not, we're all doing the best that we can. I just offer that to you to take that on as something to try on. It's not the truth of existence, but to try on. We're all doing the best that we can. And we each get to choose how to deal with the fact that ourselves and other people in our lives are doing the best that we can in the moment, which doesn't mean that things can't change and that we don't need to respond in a way that says, yes, I understand that you're doing the best you can. I need you to not do it in my life. So, my blessings to you, dear fellow traveler on this crazy planet Earth right now. Living a human life at this moment in time, probably throughout time, but at this moment in time is really complex. It's really complicated. And the way to find our way through it is to begin finding our way through ourselves. So have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.